And we're going to go a little bit out of order and do the second readers hopefully quickly, because all 4 presenting members actually, well, 3 of them actually have to be somewhere else. So Chairman Royal, do you have a report for the full committee on coming out of the ad valorem subcommittee on House Bill 78, please, sir?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the subcommittee, ad valorem tax subcommittee, met and gave a due pass recommendation to the full committee on House Bill 78.
Chair recognizes Chairman Royal to present his bill, House Bill 78, for consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 78 just attempts to define agritourism purposes. As all of you know, in the CUVA statute, a lot of local tax assessors or tax offices have tried to find ways to call breach of covenants. We just defined different purposes that would prevent it from being a breach of the covenant, and agritourism means charging admission for persons to visit, view, or participate in the operation of a farm or dairy or production of farm or dairy products for entertainment or educational purposes, or selling farm or dairy products to persons who visit such farm or dairy. We have had farms down in my area of the state who were selling strawberries in a stand on the side of the farm, and they have been ruled in breach of the covenant for doing that. We've had in North Georgia people allowing tours on the farm for educational purposes have been ruled in breach of covenant, so we're just trying to clarify the matter.
Okay. Chair to entertain anybody that has a question for the author. Anybody? Question? What's the pleasure of the committee? We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Chairman Royal, if you would stay with us for the next 3 votes, so I know you have to go, but we'll go through them quick if you can. Chairman Martin, from the sales tax? Do we have a sales tax, Chairman?
Please, Chair, I'll yield to Chairman Smith. I believe she has to go, and I need to stay.
Okay. All right. Chairman Lewis, do you have a report out of the sales tax subcommittee on House Bill 128?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Your subcommittee on sales tax met on House Bill 128, and we gave it a due pass recommendation.
Chair recognizes the lady from what district?
70.
The 70th district to present House Bill 128.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I certainly appreciate your time and the times of others here today. I bring to you today House Bill 128. This is commonly known as the School Sales Tax Holiday Bill, and also as your Energy Star or energy efficient legislation. Essentially what occurs in House Bill 128 is really the language of a date change. There are 2 date changes to reflect 2007. This legislation is sunset, so it comes before this committee every year. The date changes are August the 2nd, 2007 to August the 8th for your school tax holiday, and then October the 4th through October the 7th for your Energy Star efficient tax holidays. Our border states are more generous with their sales tax breaks, but this has been a carefully worked out compromise with our local governments and with our Department of Revenue, and also to encourage the citizens of Georgia to use energy efficient products, and to also encourage our families to get ready for the schools by giving them these tax breaks. And it's good for our economy. It helps our businesses, and our businesses and citizens fully support the bill. So I would appreciate your favorable consideration, Mr. Chair and members.
Are you confident that the dates for both of the initiatives in the bill are the most optimal dates for our consumers and also our retailers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. The year before, 2006, we combined the dates for both products. Unfortunately, the sale of the energy-efficient products did not meet the normal records that one would expect, so October is the energy-efficient month, which is why we moved it back to October for energy-efficient appliances. The school sales tax holidays, those dates vary from different school systems, but this seems to be the optimum time to give everybody a chance to get ready. Thank you.
Will Lady yield to questions from the committee? Are there any questions, members of the committee? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the committee?
Move to pass.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. The motion carries. We'll report it to the Rules Committee. Thank you
Thank you,
very
Mr.
much.
Chair, members of the committee.
Chairman Lewis, do you have a report to the committee for House Bill 162 out of your subcommittee, please, sir?
Yes, sir. We met on your subcommittee on sales tax met regarding House Bill 162, and we gave it a due pass recommendation by committee substitute.
Chair recognizes Chairman Martin to present House Bill 162.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have before you today House Bill 162 by committee substitute. You should be receiving an information packet. This is specifically geared toward Encore Park in North Fulton County. This is a partnership between Fulton County, the City of Alpharetta, and the Atlanta Symphony, who have entered into an agreement to produce this facility. And what we seek today is an exemption from sales tax for a brief period, July 2007 through June 2008, on the sales to and the tangible personal property sold to and used in the construction of this facility. And simply put, Mr. Chairman, what this allows them to do is complete the facility to its fullest, including a parking deck, which would allow the facility to be used to its maximum and yield additional ticket sales. In specific, should the facility meet their expectations, they would generate $234,000 a year on ticket sales for each 1% of sales tax. So given the facilities open in summer of 2008, should they, on an annualized basis, they could generate close to $1 million a year for the state in additional sales tax on ticket sales, and that's just the state portion. So what we seek to do here is exempt from sales tax, state and local, the construction materials used in and personal property sold to in construction of this facility, to let the state be a full partner in with the City of Alpharetta and Fulton County in producing this facility. I'd stand ready to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Gentlemen, yielded questions. Any members of the committee have any questions for the author of this legislation? You may have to holler at me, Representative Graves. I'm not looking over there enough. But I see no questions. What's the pleasure of the committee? I have a motion to pass. I have a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the proposition signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. If you would, Secretary Martin, take the chair, and I will present House Bill 357. What subcommittee did that come out of? Out of that? That's yours.
Tax reform. We have House Bill 357 by Representative O'Neill, chairman of this committee, and I'll have the chairman of the Tax Reform Subcommittee read his report. Chairman of the
How are you?
chair recognizes Representative Graves to read his committee report.
Secretary, the Tax Reform Subcommittee met yesterday and discussed House Bill 357.
Chair recognizes Chairman of Ways and Means, Representative O'Neill, to present his bill.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 357 is a one-page bill, but it's anything but simple. It's a bill to bring Georgia tax code into compliance with some last-minute revisions that were made to the federal tax code, literally some at midnight of the last day of session in 2006. When we passed our typical omnibus bill last year, what we have referred to in many ways as the Bush tax cuts, many of which were set to expire by their own terms, the federal legislation that is, for those tax cuts as of December 31st, 2005. So our omnibus bill for 2006 did not include those particular tax cuts that were set to expire. In your file, you'll see a comprehensive list of all of those tax cuts that were set to expire, and they run the gamut of just about every area of consumption and governmental compromise you can imagine. One of them is the deduction for our educators, to where if they spend their own money on their students and in their classrooms, they were able to deduct up to $250. What happened in the last minute of the session in '06 is the Congress extended the otherwise expired tax cuts in all these various categories. There were some research and development extensions. There were some environmental remediation extensions. The total of all of that is at least $7 million to Georgia taxpayers over all of the litany of these tax cuts, that if we do not act, Georgians will be unable to avail themselves of those deductions and or credits that were in those tax bills, where everybody else in the country will be able to use those at their state level, assuming they have the various taxes that these deal with. So I would ask the committee's favorable consideration on this legislation. It also deals with higher education deductibility, the $2,000 to $4,000 deductible. Again, if we don't act, then our citizens will lose the benefit of these very valuable tax cuts. And to some citizens, it's the difference of whether or not they'll be able to buy their prescriptions or not. I mean, some of these are that minute as you look through the entire federal list of all the federal codes. So I'll be glad to yield any questions, and if there are none, we'd ask for favorable consideration.
The Chairman has yielded to questions. Do members of this committee have questions for Chairman O'Neill? Seeing no questions from members of this committee, what is the pleasure of this committee? I have a motion and a second. Do pass. Recommendation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. This motion is carried. Chair, it's handed back over to Chairman O'Neill.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you to the members I know that have to go. Thank you very much for being here and making a quorum on a very busy day. I think now we'll move on to first readers. We have with us, I'm going to go a little bit out of order because I'm just looking around to see who we have. Senate Bill 58. Former governor's floor leader and a great friend of the chairman of this committee. The chair recognizes Senator Preston Smith to summarize his Senate Bill 58, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate your consideration for first reading of Senate Bill 58. This bill is actually a bill of repealer. There's a code section 48-5-237 that relates to the ability to pay a county tax bill for property that encroaches in more than one county directly to the county where the majority of the property lies, or at least where the larger tract of that property lies. And then the senior county, in terms of landmass, would remit the other county's portion back to the other county. This bill would simply, by repealing the code section, would just simply have people pay each county the amount that's due that county on a pro rata basis. My understanding is that most folks that close loans that involve property that go into multiple counties already are in this practice. They simply remit to each county what portion is owed to that county. Of course, the amount of tax that you would owe would be set in part by the amount of land in that county, and in part by that particular county's rate, which would vary depending on which county you're in. And this would also require not only at the sale of property, but anytime you pay your bill, that you just simply remit the payment for each county for the portion that lies in that county. And the bill was brought to me by local tax commissioners who indicated to me that there is some difficulty that sometimes arises when a bill is paid to one county and then some squabbling exists between the various counties where the tax is owed, and it would be perhaps easier and simpler just simply to remit that to each county. Of course, today we have with computers, and we understand where the land lies, and we understand what the amount is owed, so it's not too confusing and too difficult to pay each county, and that's the purpose for the bill.
Gentlemen, do you have questions?
I do.
Any members of the committee have any questions for the author of this legislation? We will assign this to our public policy subcommittee. Thank you, Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Look forward to hearing the merits of the legislation.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Chairman Mickey Chanel to present a first reader to the committee of House Bill 404, I believe it is, isn't it, Chairman Chanel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. House Bill 404 seeks to be a companion bill, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for a pretty omnibus bill by Senator Justin Hill. Actually, now 3 bills, Senate Bills 150, 151, 153, dealing with various reforms in the area of health care. The bill that you have before you seeks to incentivize people to use a product that is not being used basically in this state now, and that's high deductible health plans that are used with a health savings account. And that's basically what this whole bill is about. Section 1, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, on page 1, and Section 2 on page 2 both deal with the matter of exempting these insurance products from state premium taxes on Section 1 and local premium taxes on Section 2. As you know, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we do have a premium. We have a premium tax currently on insurance products in this state, and one of the things that contributes to the number of uninsured people that we have in this state is the high cost of insurance. And what this section seeks to do is to lower those costs of this product by not charging this premium tax both at the state level and at the local level. The thing is, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, this product's not being sold effectively in the state now. The state and counties and cities are now not collecting this tax, so they won't be missing anything relative to what they're doing now. Hopefully, however, when this product and if this bill passes and Senator Hill's other bill from the Senate passes, we do hope that that will increase the sales of it. Mr. Chairman, Section 3 treats everyone the same when it comes to deducting the premium paid on this product. As you know now, employers and certain other people can deduct their premiums. The individuals can't, and Section 3 basically provides an enabling piece that says they can. Again, the idea being to incentivize people to use this product. Section 4 deals with 2 things. One is that it would, on line 29 on page 2, it defines for this purpose what an employee is, and that's 25 or fewer people, and they would be provided a tax credit of $500, and then on down on line 20 on page 3, individuals would be $250. Section 5, Mr. Chairman, provides for people who spend money on certain defined technology expenses, and that's again on page 4, lines 3 through 5, for a specific period of time, and they'd be repealed. This would be through January 1, 2009. They'd get up to a $5,000 credit for that. Section 6 Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, again, follows language in the Senator's bill dealing with effectively very much encouraging everyone who can probably afford insurance to go ahead and buy it. It just deals with people who make 300% or more of the federal poverty level. That's $60,000 for a family of 4 and up. And what it says is that you have to demonstrate that you have coverage of a high deductible major medical health insurance with a minimum of $10,000 in benefits or a bond in that amount. If you don't, then you're not allowed to receive any personal exemptions on your income tax when you file it. Mr. Chairman, Section 7, I have a concession to make. I'm just not at all sure what that does. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if you allow senators to speak to this committee or not, but if you do, Senator Hill is sitting behind me. Maybe he can explain that. If that pleases the chair.
We certainly do, and relish those opportunities. On our first readers, we just need a summary of the bill, and I'm certainly convinced that the gentleman knows what's the contents of his bill, and that's. But I'm glad that you went into a little more detail than we generally do on first readers test, because I'm excited about the potential of this legislation. I know it's been a quest of yours for many years now to fill that void of working uninsured in this state, and at every level of it. I think you've done a great job. I notice there is no fiscal note with this, and I think with the credits we probably are going to need a fiscal note. I agree with the gentleman as far as the insurance premium tax is concerned. It's probably a nullity, but with these credits I think we need to know what effect that's going to have on our budget. So if we could get that ordered for the gentleman. Are there any questions? Would you yield any questions to the committee?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Any members of the committee have a question? Mr. Chair recognizes Chairman Parsons.
You had mentioned this is a bill, I think, in conjunction with legislation in
Yes, sir.
the Senate, and just a quick reading of this, it doesn't, I don't see that this would be the case, but the insurance commissioner has told us in appropriations that if Senate bills pass, that they're going to have additional people. Do you know if this would actually cause up?
I do not know, Mr. Chairman.
It doesn't appear to be any concerns.
We look forward to a spirited debate, and I appreciate the gentleman raising those issues, because that's what we need to vet out. This is a unique undertaking, and I think we all have quite a learning curve on this, but I'm excited to explore the possibilities. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Section 2, stated that the premium is not being collected.
Yes, because the product doesn't exist right now. This seeks a tax exemption, or not a tax exemption. Section 2 would exempt from local premium taxes being collected on this product. But it's not being collected now because the product doesn't exist.
Which, even if it were an eradication of an existing tax, life and health is only 1% at the local level, where other kinds of insurance are, I think, either 2.25 or 2.5 at the local level. So, but I'm confident, as is the author, that this is new business, so there's no effect on that revenue source. But I thank the gentleman for the question. Other questions for the author? If not, we're going to assign this to our income tax subcommittee, and we look forward to spirited hearings on this. Thank you, Chairman Chanel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hill. House Bill, would the Secretary please read House Bill 434?
House Bill 434 by Representative Martin, 47, to amend Title 48 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to revenue and taxation so as to provide for regional sales and use tax for transportation.
Chair recognizes Representative Martin to briefly summarize his House Bill 434.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will do that briefly. It's an 18-page bill. It's complicated, and there's already been some conversation and suggestion about perfection of the legislation. But simply put, this bill seeks to start a conversation on the implementation of a sales and use tax for the purposes of regional transportation. If 2 or more counties bind together and come up with a list of projects that sets forth a mechanism where those counties can plan, come forward with that list, agree to move forward specifically, and set that before the voters for approval, much like the educational SPLOST is used now to finance specific capital projects for schools. This would be used to finance regional transportation projects. It provides for an election. It provides for opting in and opting out by the counties. It provides for citizen input and overview. And I request, stand ready to answer any questions. Request the chairman to sign this to subcommittee so that I'm sure we will have a spirited debate along this one.
I have a couple of questions. I know when we had the special sewer tax, that legislation that dealt with primarily the city of Atlanta,
Yes.
that upped their sales tax rate, I think, collectively with the state to 8%. And I think we exempted at least new automobile sales from that. Are there any exemptions in this bill for
There are no,
the higher-priced items?
No, so there are currently no exemptions exist in this legislation.
Okay. Other questions for the author? Members of the committee? Okay. Seeing none, we're going to assign this to our sales tax subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And,
are you going to present 400 as well? Who's doing that?
I think I am.
You are? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, and I have a few more on the first readers. I have that committee meeting. If the chair would allow me to delay those to Thursday or have someone do those, I'd be happy to wait if the chair's indulgence to do those.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Secretary, would you please read House Bill 400?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 400 by Representative Earhart of the 36th to amend Title 20 and 48 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating respectively to education, revenue, and taxation.
Chair recognizes Representative Scott to present a brief overview of House Bill 400 on behalf of its primary author, Representative Earhart.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Representative Earhart couldn't be here right now. He has another meeting, a conflict, as you can imagine. Let me just, instead of going through section by section, let me just explain what this is. This is a scholarship for children who are in poverty as defined by the state of Georgia, 200% of the poverty level. And what this does is it provides for a tax credit, a direct dollar-for-dollar tax credit up to 75% of the tax burden for a corporation, up to I believe it is up to, this number has changed a lot, I'm not sure, I think it's $5 million of the tax liability, and allows that contribution to be made to school funding organizations, and those school funding organizations can in turn provide scholarships for needy children to private schools, or these school funding organizations can provide funding to public schools as well for extracurricular activities that are sponsored by public schools. It's a win-win situation. Allows for a little bit more public school, or a little bit more school choice, and allows also for corporations to participate in facilitating better education for children of Georgia. I'll be happy to yield any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Any members of the committee have any questions for? Seeing none, I'm sure this is going to receive spirited debate. We're going to assign that to the Income Tax Subcommittee. Would the Secretary please read House Bill 407?
House Bill 407 by Representative McCall, 30th, to amend Code Section 48.83 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to exemptions from sales and use tax.
Chair recognizes the Chairman of Agriculture, Representative McCall, please, to present his bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is a simple little one-page bill, contrary to what y'all been fooling with. It basically does away with the state sales tax on electricity and natural gas for Georgia's dairies. Our dairymen, there's only 285 dairies in the state, about 83,000 cows. Are at a disadvantage when it comes to pricing. Without getting into a whole lot of confusing detail, milk is priced by a federal marketing order. We are lumped in with Missouri and Texas, which most of their milk goes for cheese, which makes up Georgia's price go down because it's figured all in there, and all this is just a little show of help to try to help them, and it specifically says that it's only in the power used in the buildings that either house the milking parlor where you raise them or where your milk tank is. Sunsets in '09, and it's about $260,000 estimated hit. Is there any question?
Gentlemen, do you have any questions for the presenter of the bill? I mean, this is an ag bill, Representative Roberts. I can't imagine you don't have it.
Thank you there, sir.
Are you going to get a fiscal note on it? I know you have
Do
an
you
estimate
need
of two.
one? I don't know. You got to have one.
It is
even if
requested.
it's only
Okay.
$250,000.
We don't know that for sure until we have that. So
I don't want to say somebody talked to somebody, but that's the way it was. And revenues, I mean, the audit folks said the best numbers they had was these numbers. But I'll get you one.
we've got it ordered. I'm sure it'll be here by the subcommittee meeting.
Okay.
We're going to assign that to the sales tax subcommittee. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Secretary, House Bill 410, please.
House Bill 410 by Representative Hanner of the 148 to amend Chapter 8 of Title 48 of Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to sales and use tax.
Chair recognizes Representative Hanner to present House Bill 410, or at least a summary thereof. Please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The summary of House Bill 410, what it does is sets up for a municipal, through a local referendum, a municipal option sales tax. Now, in defining municipality on page 2, it means that any municipality means a municipality which has received a correspondence from the State Department of Natural Resources urging the municipality to make the distribution of pipe replacement its highest priority as soon as possible to correct and eliminate asbestos fiber risk for its citizens. And this will only encounter actually one city. That's what we were told by EPD. I'm in the middle of getting a letter saying that it's the only letter they've sent out. And what we've got is a small rural town that just has 1,700 people, and they need this in order to help replace their lines. That's basically the summary of what it does.
Gentlemen, yield for questions.
Yes, sir.
Any member of the committee have any questions for the author? Chair recognizes Representative Roberts.
This is just a friendly question. This pertains to the one small town that's out there that's got a huge problem now that EPD has told them they have to clean up. And don't have the assets in order to go in and fix the problem. This will help them.
That's correct.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I suppose the alternative would be just raising the property taxes.
Well, you could. The property taxes now are currently at 18 mills. Then you're talking about one mill brings in around $14,000, and you're talking about a town of 1,700. That actually the population is over 90% low to moderate income and aged, and it's tough to do that as far as raising water prices and all.
Other questions? Any member? We'll be assigning this Representative Hanner to our sales tax subcommittee and set it for hearing soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Buckner with us? Do I see her anywhere? Representative Buckner in the room? Representative Thomas? Okay. Secretary, read House Bill 438, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 438 by Representative Thomas 100th to amend Article 2 of Chapter 7, Title 48 of Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to the imposition and computation of income taxes.
Chair recognizes Representative Thomas to present a summary of House Bill 438.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 438 would provide a tax credit for the purchase of or rental of business property as well as renewable energy property. So it would provide a tax incentive for investment both at the residential level and also commercial level for various renewable energy properties that are defined in the bill. And, that's the long and the short of it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about it, sir.
Gentleman yields for questions. Any members of the committee have any questions for the author? We have a fiscal note requested. Could you tell us what kinds of energy we're talking about? I think I saw solar in here.
There's yes, Mr. Chairman, if you turn to page 2, beginning on line 23, renewable energy property is defined, and you have biomass equipment, which would extend to machinery needed for biofuel production. You have hydroelectric generation, and then there's various types of solar equipment, as well as wind equipment.
Okay. Any other questions for the author? Okay. None? I hear questions? Representative Roberts?
Are we looking at sunsetting this one? Right now, it's not on here.
Is there a sunset in your bill?
No, Mr. Chairman, I do not believe there is at the moment, and that would be.
I can tell you it'll have a whole lot better chance of getting through this
yes,
committee.
Sir. I
if
would
it has
expect
one,
to
just
see
in
a
case.
sunset on it as part of the subcommittee investigations of the bill.
All right. Hearing no further inquiry from the author, we're going to assign this bill, Representative Thomas, to our Income Tax Subcommittee, and look forward to hearing that in that subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Hill's with us. Mr. Secretary, if you would read House Bill 453, please.
453 by Representative Hill, the 21st, to amend Chapter 14, Title II of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to the sale of agricultural and forest products so as to provide for limited liability for owners and operators of farm operating agritourism activities under certain circumstances.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from which district?
21st.
The 21st to present House Bill 453, please, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This bill primarily is designed to slightly expand some of the definitions of agritourism, particularly in the area of an agritourism professional, so as to allow the liability for the inherent risks that go along with agritourism. And we also expanded it to whether or not the participant has paid or not paid in such activities. Sometimes these agritourism facilities will allow a school, particularly a nonprofit school, to come on board in a non-paying fashion, and we wanted to make sure that they were also covered under the liability, and that agritourism is covered under the similar type of liability that you might have under your equine type of liability. Because it deals with agritourism, it is under the revenue code, even though it is really might be more readily identified under another code for the liability section, but it does fall under the code, but it does not really change the CUVA requirements.
All right. I see where it's in one section it talks about limiting the civil liability of farmers involved in such activities. I'm reading on line 2122 of page
Yes, sir.
1. Could you expand on that? Limiting how? So
this would be if a person came on a facility that was in agritourism, whether it's a pick your own or it could even cover a maze or something like that, and a person was to trip and fall. In farms, you have certain inherent risks that might be out there. There's various types of equipment, machinery, even animals that are involved in various types of agritourism, and a person, and there's proper notification to be given in here, which I didn't go into. I thought we're just going into this overall, but on page 3, starting on line 3, we go into the types of notification that would have to be there for the people so that they would understand there is a certain risk when they are in such an area, such as you would have with an equine laws, horseback riding, where there is an inherent risk in riding a horse. There's an inherent risk on coming on a farm where you might come in contact with animals or machinery, and it's to notify them and reduce the liability accordingly.
I'm curious, Representative, we already have in the law as a defense to injury of this type what we call assumption of the risk. I mean, we knowingly assume risk when we ride a roller coaster, for instance, or involve ourselves in exciting endeavors. Why just pick this one winner out of all of society to change the level of liability? Why?
Apparently, agritourism has fallen into a little bit of a never land niche in between whether it was considered farming or tourism or whatever, and DCH felt and the farmers have all felt that they have needed this for absolute protection. So I'm bringing this on behalf of the Farm Bureau, the farmers in my constituents, and the DCH.
Well, if you put up all the signs you require to saying this is probably a dangerous situation, and yet you would have otherwise may have had a duty to mitigate a dangerous situation, the signs are enough to limit the liability. I mean, I guess that's kind of where we're going
Yes,
here.
sir. This is modeled almost exactly after the equine type of signs that you have when you go horseback riding.
Okay. Other members have questions? Chairman Roberts.
I think what the author is hoping to get at here is like what he was talking about with your corn mazes and that type of events, when a lot of time the terrain there is uneven and all, and it's easy for someone to twist an ankle or something like that running through there, and that's I think what we're trying to look at here with this piece of legislation, with the signs and all. Let them know up front that you are going to something that ain't as smooth I mean, that's what it's pertaining to. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm going to assign it to the friendliest place we have for CUVA projects. I'm going to assign this to our ad valorem tax subcommittee, but I think it's going to have a spirited debate.
Thank you very much,
Chairman. Let's see. There he is. I'm sorry. Representative Pruitt, I didn't see you this whole time. Mr. Secretary, House Bill 450, please.
House Bill 450 by Representative Pruitt of the 144th and others to amend Code Section 48863 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated relating to sales and use taxation of contractors.
Chair recognizes Representative Pruitt from the 144th to summarize the bill, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I appreciate you allowing me to come, and I thought you would just save me to last because I'm a freshman, but it was because you couldn't see me.
No, we want to have plenty of time to mess with you.
Well, based on my colleague and friend, Mr. Representative Jay Roberts, this is a short, sweet, and simple bill. Really, in short summary, this bill is really a clarification of the tax law when it pertains to contractors and when and where they pay taxes, and particularly relating to county taxes, and has really no effect on state revenue of any kind. And basically, there's some confusion among contractors as to where and how they're supposed to pay their state sales tax and county tax. And with that, I'll take questions.
Is this the first time the gentleman's ever presented a bill before a committee? Is this your first time?
Is that obvious, Mr. Chairman?
We don't like answering questions with questions in this committee.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, it is.
The gentleman has yielded for questions on his first presentation. Do we have any questions from members of the committee? Chair recognizes Representative Scott.
Yes, Mr. Pruitt, thank you. Could you please explain what a situs is?
No, sir, but I can't answer a question with a question.
On page 2, line 1 of your bill.
I have people, sir, that are more qualified to answer that question than I, and I'll be glad to have them at our next discussion, please, or at subcommittee.
No further questions.
As I understand it, there has been some confusion in the law regarding the proper situs to establish the local share of the sales and use taxes, where your business may be located in one county and equipment for a job, a contract job, would be delivered there to be installed in another county. There has been over time some confusion about that, and I think this bill tries to eliminate that confusion. Is that a fair summary of what you're trying to do?
Yes, sir, it is, and looking after the small businessman, it is something that needs to be clarified because they are potentially at risk at the present time.
And it's my understanding the gentleman has been in his lifetime a heating and air conditioning subcontractor yourself, or a contractor as well.
Among other things.
Among.
That's right. Yes,
Other questions? Representative Pruitt, we're going to assign this to our sales tax subcommittee, and I'm sure it's going to receive a spirited debate there.
Looking forward to it,
all right.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. All right. Mr. Secretary, House Bill 322, please.
HB 322 by Representative Stevens of the 164th to amend Part 1 of Article 2 of Chapter 5 of Title 48 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to ad valorem tax exemptions.
Chair recognizes Chairman Stevens to present a summary of the bill, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. This bill simply is an attempt to try to keep our ad valorem tax off of the business aircraft that essentially reside in our state. There's some exposure to the tune of $18 million and more to some companies, and we believe that we ought to keep them here instead of them having to move their inventory to another area.
Gentlemen, yield for questions.
Certainly.
What was the $18 million figure again?
That was one of the numbers that was given to me by one of our home-based companies, that the possible exposure to ad valorem tax for the aircraft that they have housed in Georgia that would not be subject to in another state.
Okay. Other questions for the author of the legislation? Do we have? Yes. I recognize Chairman Parsons.
Sure. I guess you're talking about inventory of companies that actually manufacture it. Is that right?
I believe this was the bill that had to do with strictly business aircraft.
You said move inventory. I can't imagine a company that's located here, they have their aircraft here in Georgia for a reason. Move to another state.
They can move their home office to another state. And for $18 million, I would do that.
But we have ad valorem tax on it.
We do. There are certain aircraft that do not pay an ad valorem tax. And this is, like I said, this is only an attempt to keep those companies here in Georgia, where they're treated not equally in other states.
Chairman Royal.
Yes, sir.
$18 million you're referring to, is that spread all over the state of Georgia? Is that metro area? Where's $18 million getting in?
It's spread all over the state.
Is there a sunset you know of in this
Yes,
legislation?
sir, but that's a good place to put one down here at the end of section 2.
These kind of bills sure have a lot better chance of getting through this committee when they're sunsetted.
Absolutely.
But I'll let the gentleman certainly deal with that on his own. Any other questions? We're going to assign this to our ad valorem subcommittee. Thank you, Chairman Stevens, for that presentation. Mr. Secretary, House Bill 351, while we got him in the bullpen there.
HB 351 by Representative Stevens of the 164th to amend Article 2 of Chapter 12 of Title 50 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to Georgia Council for the Arts.
I'm really anxious to recognize the gentleman on this. This has lit up my email machine more than any bill this year. Chair recognizes Chairman Stevens to present 351.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, there's another bill being heard in my committee right now, which may be amended to incorporate both these bills. There's one that Representative Wilkinson is also presenting. And, of course, the purpose of this bill is to create tax credits for people who want to donate to an arts trust that the governor has sought fit to send some seed money in this particular budget, and which is why the bill is following. It does create an arts trust so that it can leverage with public-private dollars the donations for tax credits to be given out in the form of grants to qualified agencies.
Will the gentleman yield for questions?
Yes, sir.
Any member of the committee have questions for the author?
Yes, sir, and I do understand this has got some conversation.
That's true.
It certainly wouldn't apply to me. People who make large donations or contributions directly to organizations, would they be now incentivized to But if this trust is not to get the tax credit, it's not given to the organization, right?
No, and in fact, the exact opposite is true. It generates more. There is an additional benefit to give not only to the trust that you're giving to now, but also with the tax credit to leverage those even more than you're giving now. So it has the potential, and I'll in subcommittee have somebody come to speak to that.
We'll certainly look forward to that. Any other questions? We're going to assign that, Chairman Stevens, to our income tax subcommittee. Ms. Secretary, House Bill 451, please.
HB 451 by Representative Lewis of the 15th and Representative Stevens of the 164th to amend Chapter 8 of Title 48 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to sales and use taxation.
Chair recognizes the Chairman Stevens yet again.
In the last of my legislative package today, Mr. Chairman, this is a bill that recognizes the severe economic impact that tourism brings to the state. It limits for the use of the tax abatement here. Those companies that have built large economic development projects, tourism projects that are in excess of $25 million. In addition, they must have at least 50% of the people that visit this attraction or this attraction to be from out of state.
I apologize to the gentleman. I didn't get much of that. Could you say that? Explain that again. Where
it actually gives the abatement for up to 10 years. The sales and use and tax refunds to companies creating tourism attractions that are large in their investment. That is, to qualify, you must have an investment of over $25 million, and you must have create an attraction that is has at least 50% of its visitors or more are not residents of the states. This bill was drafted by Representative Lewis as a carbon copy of the law in Kentucky.
I was going to ask you, was this what we've been calling a Kentucky bill? Any questions for the presenter? Seeing none, we're going to assign that to our Public Finance and Policy Subcommittee. Mr. Secretary, you would read House Bill 441, please.
HB 441 by Representative Floyd of the 147th to amend Article 2 of Chapter 7 of Title 48 of Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to the imposition and computation of income taxes.
Chair recognizes Chairman Royal to present House Bill 441, please.
Mr. Chair, I think Mr. Mills wants to do this worse than I do.
I'll be glad to help in any way I can.
I recognize Chairman Mills of the Banking Committee.
Mr. Chairman, all this does basically corrects a word that last year in a piece of legislation was changed from direct to indirect, and it changed it requiring indirect expenses to be considered in the tax calculations regarding banks. And what we did when that bill was presented, it was basically presented to the committee as something that would be pretty close to revenue neutral. If anything at all, it might be a little expense incurred, and that certainly is the way the committee voted whenever they passed it on through the General Assembly, but that has not been the end-all effect. And without this correction, we're actually continuing a tax liability that I don't think the General Assembly wants.
Thank you, the gentleman yield for questions. My recollection had to do with the deductibility of interest expense that was attributable to otherwise tax-free instruments held for investment by banks in their investment portfolio, and it affected a lot of our community banks as well as the large banks in the state negatively, and it was an unintended consequence. Is my general recollection. Is that we're talking about the same
we have
bill?
a great way of saying things, and I couldn't agree anymore.
Well, thank you for your presentation, and we're going to assign that to the Income Tax Subcommittee. Wow, what good timing. Secretary, read House Resolution 199, please.
H.R. 199 by Representative Sims of the 169th, proposing an amendment to the Constitution so as to allocate the revenue from the state sales and use tax with respect to the sale of food and beverages for off-premises consumption to fund relief from ad valorem property taxes for educational purposes.
Chair recognizes the Vice Chair of this committee, Representative Chuck Sims, to present House Resolution 199.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I apologize for being late. I was in another committee meeting. Basically, this is a resolution that would call for a referendum for the actual earmarking of said sales tax funding that we would impose and earmark those funds for certain benefits. Those benefits being the Peach Care Program, the opening the waiting list for mental health and mental retardation, for a $400 million ad valorem property tax relief, and an indigent defense relief. Those taxes would be coming from the sales tax back on food, which is, if you would look back at it, it's about an $847 million add back to the budget. These funds would then be earmarked to those programs. That's a 2-year bill, as you know, Mr. Chairman, and we will respectfully look at that over the summer, if you would.
Well, in the meantime, any questions for the author of this resolution? Hearing none, we're going to assign that to our sales tax subcommittee. Mr. Sims?
Thank you.
Okay, Representative Buckner in the room anywhere? Anybody here for Representative Buckner to present either of her? I hope she hasn't sustained an injury, because she acknowledged in the House just an hour ago she was going to be here. I hope she's all right. Anybody here for Representative Bob Smith? No one here? If the Secretary would read, and then after that take over the chair for House Bill 439, please, sir.
HB 439 by Representative O'Neill, the 146, to amend Code Section 48740.26 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to tax credits for film, video, digital productions in this state. Chair recognizes the Chairman of Ways and Means, Representative O'Neill, to present his bill.
Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, this is sort of a sequel to what we did 2 years ago, where we completely updated our tax code with incentives to attract back to our state what we had lost, essentially an entire industry of entertainment, both for TV shows that run long-term and movies. And we installed a system of tax credits to induce these folks to come back, because we had found over time that we have just about every possible look that any movie maker or TV serial show maker could possibly ever want, as to use a word that was questioned earlier, as a situs for their movies. And we have seen great recovery of that industry coming in our state. We've seen lots of major movie productions now come back that we weren't getting over about the last 5 years. The amazing thing about it, too, is the residual effect, the residual economic effect. I mean, there's still people that travel to Savannah, Georgia, and pay $5 to look at a bench, which is where that guy said that you got a box of chocolates, because that movie was made there. I see people every weekend at the Whistle Stop Cafe in Juliet, Georgia, getting fried green tomatoes, and I'll promise you that is the only thing within 30 miles of that place. But it still draws a waiting line for lunch there, again, because of the movie. So the residuals of these are very hard to pin down. This legislation takes us to another step and gets us even more competitive with the most competitive of all the states. The original legislation kind of was experimentally got us in the middle. It did indeed gin up a lot of new business. What I like about the credits and the way they're designed in this particular legislation is that the money has to be spent before they're earned. In other words, we know that the dollars are in the economy before the credits are accrued, unlike a lot of other credits that we do. we have a hard time later on justifying why they were paid out. We know for a fact that these are spent into the economy. It also had a feature to where some of our tier 1 and 2 counties, which otherwise would have very little ability to attract this kind of business and industry, got extra credits for that, and we also gave extra credits if these production companies hired Georgia residents as opposed to bringing their own labor force with them. So it was a win-win-win all the way around incentive, and we're just trying to get that now to a level that is really unparalleled or certainly unsurpassed by any other state, because I believe we have every other aspect in our within our beautiful boundaries for just about any look that any movie would want. As a matter of fact, I've seen our tourism people, they've archived something now over 6,000 photographs of scenes around the state now that a potential movie maker, director, producer can go on the internet and just look. I mean, if he wants like a old-timey 1950s village, I mean, we still have, several of those if he wants. I mean, we even have places in Georgia that look like the Swiss Alps, and up in North Georgia with the snow cabins that could be made to look that way. It's just amazing. Over in your area, Chairman Mills, Lake Lanier is some of the most beautiful venues and majestic sites possible. I mean, that'd be a great place to have on Golden Pond too. And all that now is available to these folks, and we're inducing. And that's what this bill is going to be all about, and that's just a general summary. And again, we're looking at the true efficacy of how well it may work out. And I'll be glad to yield any questions, or just go ahead and shut up.
I for one, can't wait to see on Golden Pond 2. I'm sure that's going to be exciting. Mr. Chairman, does this allow for tax credits for television production?
It does absolutely allow for those tax credits, and encourages them to bring shows like Matlock that was filmed here in Atlanta over and over. A tremendous economic benefit to the area, as well as just a general draw to have people come see where all these scenes were. I mean, you can see the street scenes still when you watch the old Matlock series here in Atlanta. So, yes, it does have those credits.
That's great. Maybe they'll make a movie on the great work we do in Ways and Means someday. Who knows? The Chair recognizes Representative Lynette Stanley Turner for questions.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I think it's a great bill and welcome it. You are moving it from 9% to 15%, is that correct?
That's the proposal. I would imagine that's going to be debated extensively in the committee. And frankly, there is an ongoing research project from gathering what other states are able to do under the same circumstances. What we want to do is position Georgia as the #1 attraction state to the extent that it's financially feasible for us to give those credits. So that's not written in stone, but that's the way the bill's written currently.
So
yes,
it's the 15% is what the really, really competitive states are offering. Is that the high mark?
That's the high mark right now that we know of. But there is an ongoing effort now, an initiative to find out where the best is. And we figured Delta can get all these people here in a hurry too.
Right. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Richard Royal.
Mr. Chairman, I notice they have removed the additional tax credit for the Tier 1 and Tier 2 counties. Can you tell me why that was done?
Yes, sir. We kind of got a little bit blindsided on that. It turned out that the initial initiative there was to get it out in the rural communities of Georgia, hopefully, right, and incentivize that. But for classification purposes, the city of Atlanta actually was in those tiers. And not that we don't want to bring plenty of business to Atlanta, we do, but there was no incentive really for people to ever get past the city of Atlanta, in most cases, out into the rural areas where we did, so that's why that was removed.
It seems to me like it would have been better to redefine the city of Atlanta, because they fall under a special provision of Tier 1, Tier 2 for certain districts. This eliminates the rural areas, the poor areas of Georgia with the extra incentive.
I'm going to be very, very glad to listen to those ideas and suggestions as we debate this bill. I'm anxious to get after it and incorporate all those good ideas into it. Thank the gentleman for those thoughts.
Chair recognizes Representative Sims.
I just sort of reiterating what Chairman Royal down in our way, down in Lakeland, Georgia. They filmed a movie not too long several years ago, Gator, with Burt Reynolds. I mean, it Hank's Fun. I don't know if anybody's seen that movie or not, but it created quite a stir down there. And of course, the Wilds of the Okefenokee, of course, down in our areas, is another place down in Ware County that they've done several movies. And so, those just, I think I've got the same concerns that Representative Roll does about the Tier 1, Tier 2 counties.
I think it would help, Representative Sims, when those production companies go into your area, that if they get more of a record of returning from your area, because a lot of times they, I think a lot of them are reluctant to go back when their loved ones never showed back up at home after they were there. So that might be better than even the credits. I would just make that as a humble suggestion to your area.
Chair recognizes Representative Parsons.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to ask you this. I just don't understand. I probably should. On the first page, line 19 there, paragraph C, it says that this wouldn't be allowed, if I'm reading this correctly, for production. I guess this would be for any company. Production expenditures in the state did not exceed. Production companies affiliates that invest in state certified production approved by the Public Economic Development Act, whose average annual total production expenditures in the state did not exceed $30 million in 2002, 2003, and 2004. There shall be allowed. This would be allowed. Why is that?
That's a very good question, and not that we have anything against this particular company. It's a great diamond in the crown of Georgia already, but we had a huge production company that was already resident in Atlanta that would have had a tremendous windfall as a result of this, and it would not have incentivized any of that. So that's actually kind of a carve out to make the rest of it economically feasible. And I thank the gentleman for the question. I'm happy to reveal who that is if anybody wants me to, but I don't.
Any further questions from committee members? No further questions from committee members. This bill will be assigned to the Income Tax Subcommittee. Chair recognizes Representative O'Neill once again for HB 447. And Representative O'Neill, I'll allow you to just go ahead and...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a bill that is a work in process, I'll say. It came about literally almost midnight of the 19th day when we have to have this legislation dropped, and it deals with a very, very technical area of the tax code, which some feel, and I'm not sure 100% yet, myself even, but some feel gets abused, and it has to do with what's known as a real estate investment trust, which are unique unto themselves under the federal law. But this particular bill deals with what we call captive real estate investment trust, and that's where I'm my own alter ego. In other words, if you go to O'Neill Enterprises and I do business, O'Neill REIT can own a building and property that I do business in, and the REIT is actually owned, or the proceeds from the REIT are actually sort of what I'd call paid out of the backside in dividends to any assignable area. For instance, to a state which does not have a corporate income tax. So the long and short of the captive REITs is that it is possible under current tax law to do business in the state of Georgia, utilize all of our wonderful infrastructure, our otherwise very friendly atmosphere for business in Georgia with all the inducements that we've talked about here today, and yet avoid any corporate income tax in Georgia by sort of a tricky structure is what some people would characterize it as. As I said, it is for me still a work in process. There have been some articles basically putting a light on how this is done around the nation. Other states have come forward and basically closed these loopholes. I am always for dancing with who brung us, and What I really like is to favor business that's in Georgia, that hires people in Georgia and makes their investments in Georgia. What I don't like is those that come to Georgia and use our markets and then ship their money and their products and their employees and their investments outside of this state. So that's why this is a working process. We'll be looking at the efficacy of all sides of those arguments throughout this process, and if we do identify abuse, we have a bill in the pipeline to where we can deal with that accordingly, and frankly, we can give a lot better tax treatment to those businesses that more deserve it, that are resident here, that do their investment here, and hire the people here. If we're able to close some of these loopholes like we did in a prior piece of legislation known as House Bill 191. So, and again, I've not made up my mind, nor has anybody else around, whether or not all these things are really going on, or if there's enough there to deal with, or whatever. But it is a working process, and I look forward to us working through that for the good of our constituents. And I'll yield any questions.
Do any of the members of the committee have questions for the chairman on this bill? No questions. The chair assigns this bill to the Income Tax Subcommittee, and the chair is handed back over to the Chairman O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Has anybody else arrived that has business before this committee, or has surrogately for anybody? Specifically, Representative Buckner and Representative Smith were on our agenda. Going once, twice, sold. Is there any other business come before the committee? I want to especially thank the members of the committee today. This has probably been one of the most chaotic days, where everybody had at least 4 places they had to be at one time. Thank you for your attendance to this committee and your allegiance to this committee. It's very much appreciated. If there's no more business come before the committee, we stand adjourned.